What's up, fellas? My battery's about to die. Good day to talk about God. Beautiful day. Talk about God. That's what I'm gonna do right now. Today, I will be unpacking my good bud from the Bible, Moses. Moses, a lot of people know who he is. You know, he was in Egypt, ran away, was supposed to die. And then he's the guy that split the Red Sea. That's what he's mainly known for. Splitting the Red Sea and all that good stuff. But I'm going to focus on a different part of Moses. I'm going to focus on his beginning. From his childhood to when God first spoke to him. I'm just going to focus on that, and we're going to take some lessons from there. I'm going to give the background to Moses. So let me set the stage. So we're in Egypt, okay? And in Egypt, we have Pharaoh, who is the Pharaoh, the whole ruler. He's the number one. He's the big daddy. And then everything's good. Egypt is very powerful, the most powerful nation during this time. But things start to kind of worry Pharaoh. And the thing that's worrying Pharaoh the most is the size of the Hebrew people, the amount of Hebrew people in Egypt. Because he's thinking to himself, shoot, if these people try to rebel against us, it'll be very easy for them because there's so many of them. So he's like, what do you do when there's too many people? Kill them, get them out. Pharaoh decides that he's gonna first tell the midwives, which is the people that, the Egyptians that assisted the Hebrew women in giving birth. He was like, you guys just kill the babies, just kill them. But then God persuaded the midwives to take pity on the Hebrew babies, so then they couldn't do it. And then they just told Pharaoh, it's just when the Hebrew women, when they pop those babies out, they pop them out, so we don't have time to kill them. Then Pharaoh has a new plan, and his new plan is, got an itch. He is going to force all the Hebrew people to throw their boys into the Nile. So as soon as they're born, or if they have like young kids, kill them, throw them in the Nile, they're done, get them out. Because he's trying to decrease their population. Now, population's still booming. They are baby making machines, these Hebrew people. And Pharaoh still feels threatened by the Hebrew people. So he's like, boom, solution. His solution is to enslave them. Because, we've seen it done in history countless number of times. If you feel threatened by someone, just enslave them. So he puts the Hebrew people in chains, and then now we have God's people enchained in Egypt. All this is happening. We have Moses' story pops up in the middle of this. So Moses' mother is supposed to throw him into the river, but she was like, nah, dude, I'm not about that. So then she makes like a little papyrus, however you pronounce that. Again, not a theologian, 16-year-old girl just trying to talk about Jesus. She puts him in like the little basket thing that was made out of the plants that grew near the river. So they're waterproof, they're really tall, perfect place to hide a baby. So she makes a basket, puts the baby on the side of the river, and it's just like, hope that kid doesn't die. And this is where it gets a little interesting. Moses' sister is looking from afar and just watching her baby brother kind of start to float. And then Pharaoh's daughter sees this basket and probably hears the crying baby and goes up and gets it. And then Moses' sister swoops on in. It's like, yo, Pharaoh's daughter, do you want help raising? You want me to find an Israelite to help take care of this kid? Because, babies need to be breastfed and all that stuff. And Pharaoh's daughter, she wasn't about to do that for no Hebrew. So then the sister goes and gets the mom. Then they have Moses for a little bit, raise him, and then he goes and lives with Pharaoh in the palace, in the Egyptian palace. All right, now let's talk about Moses as he's growing up. So he's just chilling, having a good life. He's a Hebrew, kinda, but also an Egyptian, kinda. So just honestly a mess. And so he is out chilling one day. He goes outside and he notices that an Egyptian is beating a Hebrew. Like just striking a Hebrew. And then Moses is like, dude, no. So then Moses ends up murdering the Egyptian and then buries him. Not the best circumstance to be in. Moses is locked between two identities, He's like, Hebrew, they're my people, they're my blood. But then Egyptians, they raised me, I eat because of them. I'm not a slave because I live with Pharaoh's daughter. So he's stuck in the middle between these two ethnicities, these two cultures, these two upbringings that he's constantly had to battle his whole life. And the next day, he goes out and he sees two Hebrews fighting. And he's like, yo, why are you guys fighting? Let me read the response to you guys. Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" And Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must have become known." Obviously, the people know that Moses is now a murderer and killed an Egyptian. So Pharaoh is like, I gotta find Moses and kill him. So Pharaoh's after Moses, and Moses is booking. If I had a Pharaoh coming after me, I would do the exact same thing. My legs would start going at a speed of Usain Bolt, and I would be out of there in 3.25 seconds. Goodbye, fellas. So he starts leaving. Moses marries one of the daughters, and then Moses has a new family. In Moses' life, there's a few key things I want to make sure we all are on the same page on. Moses, honestly, all around is just confused. He's been confused since he was put in a piper's basket to float away and die in the Nile. This man is a Hebrew that's being raised as an Egyptian, an outcast because he doesn't belong fully Hebrew, fully Egyptian. This man is a murderer. This man's a runaway. And Moses is very insecure because he has a stutter, so he's a stutterer. And just a side note, I don't blame Moses for stuttering. I could see why he would have this problem with stuttering. When you stutter, you can't finish the beginning, the middle, or the end of a word. You get stuck. You start to stumble. You can never finish. And I feel like Moses hasn't been able to finish much in his life because he's constantly stumbling. And I feel like that constant internal stumble of just since the beginning, he's always being tossed between these two worlds, between these two spheres of influence. He's always being tossed between. He's always stumbling. He can never really get fully somewhere and be at peace. I think that's cool how he struggles with stuttering because I can see why he would. Cool side note, just a little side note. That's not in the Bible, but that's just how I take things a certain way. That's just how I perceived that part. Moses is just chilling. He's with his new family, with his new life, starting new adventures. This is where the story starts to pick up some pace. So right now, Moses is just in the wilderness, attending the flock. Like, he's just chilling. And then he's just like going through the mountains. And all of a sudden, he's just walking, minding his own business, and he sees this burning bush off into the distance. That burning bush is God. God is presenting himself to Moses because God is about to give Moses a game plan. God's about to be like, boy, you're going to do this and you're going to help me out. Exodus verse 4, I'm going to read verse 4 through 10. It says, "When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, 'Moses, Moses.' And Moses said, 'Here I am.' 'Do not come any closer,' God said. 'Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground.' Then he said, 'I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob.' At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, 'I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." So God literally just told Moses, dude, my people are crying. I hear them. I need you to get up. I need you to go. I need you to go rescue them. Bring them to a land that I'm going to take you to, and it's going to be good. So you're down? Good. Let's go. Start going. The main point of this whole video is this response Moses gives right after God tells him what to do. But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" The main chunk I want to focus on is the who am I. The fact that Moses asks God, "Who am I?" I took it three different ways. Three different ways we can learn a lesson. Doing three things that I feel we do every single day when he's asking, "Who am I?" I think it's interesting because Moses, the things he's been identified by his ethnicity, his upbringing, his actions, and his flaws. Ethnicity, Hebrew. Then his upbringing, a Hebrew-raised Egyptian. Then we have his actions, murderer. He's a runaway. And we have his flaws. We all have our flaws. Moses' flaw would be his stutter. All these things, his ethnicity, his upbringing, his actions, and his flaws, that's what's identifying Moses to himself and to others. And I feel like we all can relate to that. Our ethnicity, our upbringing, our actions, and our flaws, all of us define ourselves or let other people define, and we identify with those four things. Initially, I believe he's asking because he's doubting. He's asking God, who am I to go to Pharaoh and to bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He has so much self-doubt that he's asking, who am I to do the will of God? Who am I? Me, the murderer? Me, the stutterer? Me, the runaway? Me, the outcast? Am I even Hebrew? Am I even Egyptian? Me. Who am I to bring the Israelites? The Israelites hate me. The Egyptians hate me. I killed an Egyptian. The Israelites looked at me and saw me as a free Hebrew. They outcasted me from the beginning. Moses is asking God, who am I? Because first he views himself as inadequate. And I feel like I struggle with that. I view myself as inadequate all the time. And I feel like we all struggle with that not being good enough. That if we were just here, maybe, but we're here. So Moses is saying, who am I to do the will of God? Now the next thing as he's asking God, who am I? He's actually asking God a more of a who are you kind of question. When he asks who am I, him and God can continue to converse, and then Moses is like, okay God, I understand that, but what will the Israelites say to me? What are they gonna say if they ask who sent me? Then God responds and he says, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Again, I'm not a theologian, so I'm not sure if I'm 100% right on this. I really honestly don't care. Because verse 11, he asks, who am I that I should go to Israel and da-da-da-da-da. And then in verse 14, that's when God says to Moses, I am who I am. So Moses isn't familiar with God. God doesn't just appear in burning bushes every single day. That's not a normal thing to happen on a nice bushy-tailed Tuesday. When he asks, who am I also think he's asking, who are you? And the way God responds later by saying, I am who I am, that's a lesson. And the lessons will come, don't worry. I'll explain the lessons once I'm done. So when Moses asks, who am I interpret it as, first he's asking because he is doubting. Secondly, I think he's asking because he's asking God who he is. Not necessarily who Moses is himself, but who God is. Thirdly, I believe he's asking because he wants God to finally define him. Back to Moses' past, this man has been defined by ethnicity, his upbringing, his actions, and his flaws. And I think it's interesting that his first question to God is not, do you not know I'm a murderer? Do you not know I stutter? Do you not know I don't belong? Do you not know I'm barely Hebrew? I'm barely Egyptian? Do you not know? It's something to take note on how Moses' first question to God is, who am I? To me, that shows that Moses wants God to define him. He's asking because he wants to be defined at this point. Okay, quick puppet intermission. This is cute now. Come here, Kobe. Kobe, come. Oh my gosh. Come. Oh, and this is Kobe. Ow, my arm. Okay, come here. Come say hi, pumpkin. Say hi. Do you love me? Thank you for the kisses. Oh, you're so cute. Pumpkin. Puppy intermission. Puppy intermission. Okay, I gotta teach some lessons. So you can't make noise, okay? So now I'm gonna unpack the lessons we can learn from Moses asking, who am I? And the first one, where he's asking because he's doubting himself, we can learn the lesson of when we doubt, we leave no room for God's full plan. When Moses is doubting himself, he's not allowing God to use him to do the work that needs to be done. God has work for us to do. We have work to do. And if we begin to doubt ourselves, we no longer allow God to use us as an open channel to get that work done. Moses, he thought he wasn't good enough. He thought he was inadequate. He looked at all of his flaws. He looked at his past and he said, you can't use that, God. In Matthew 14 verse 31, it says, You of little faith, why do you doubt? And I always think about that verse whenever I see myself viewing myself not the way God would view me, viewing myself, or doubting God. I just think about when Jesus told his disciples, you of little faith, why do you doubt? And that wakes me right up. And I realize me doubting myself or me doubting my God, like Moses was at this point, we push out God's plan. And when it comes to God's plan, there is no room for doubt. There's always work to be done. And if you want to do it, God will give it to you. And not only will he give you that opportunity, he'll give you the strength, he'll give you the drive, he'll give you the endurance, he'll give you everything you need to persevere because you're not doubting. Lesson 1, when you doubt, you leave no room for God's plan. Whenever you think, who am I to do God's work? Exactly. You are you, and you can do God's work because God wants you to do his work. Now, the second lesson that we can learn from Moses is constant curiosity. Moses is asking, who am I? And he's low-key asking God, who are you? And God responds, I am who I am. God gave him a sufficient answer. God said, I am who I am. That's it, period. You don't need to know anymore. I am God, and I am God. And I am who I am. So when Moses says, who am I? Whenever we try and define ourselves, we're God's creation. We are truly defined by being a child of God. That's our label. Not a runaway, not an outcast, not a jock, not a nerd, not a dancer, not a basketball player. No. You aren't any of those things. You're good at that stuff, but who you are is who your Creator wanted you to be, and that is a child of them. From Moses asking God, being curious as to who he is, that's a lost art, I feel. Because in the Bible, it calls us to constantly seek God. If you're curious about something, you're gonna go seek that answer. You're gonna go Google that answer. You're gonna ask Siri, That's what I do. I'm gonna go to Google, I'm gonna type in my question, type in my word, and I'm gonna seek the answer. You know when you go to page 6 of Google, you are seeking. That is the kind of seeking we should do for God. We should want to always seek him. So that's a lesson I feel like we can also learn from Moses, is that desire to seek God and the desire to know God. Because you only ask questions for things you want to know. So in class, if you don't ask questions in a class, it's because you honestly don't want to know or you're scared of knowing. And when it comes to knowing God, I fear not knowing God more than I fear asking the question. If I'm going to go to Jeremiah 29:13, it says, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. So God doesn't want to hide from you, but he does want you to seek after him. Moses' case, Moses doesn't really have to seek God. Like, God came to him in a burning bush. But as the story continues and the more he starts to find himself in God, the more he asks questions about God to get closer to God. He starts to seek God more and then ends up doing incredible miracles for God. And then finally, the third lesson I believe we can all learn from Moses is that God is constantly at work. The fact that Moses immediately asks God to define him by saying, who am I? Already shows how God is changing his heart. And when you ask God, who am I, and you let him define you, he will look at you and he will say, you are enough. He will say, I have made you, you are enough. You don't need more. He will say, you come as you are. Just how I created you, that's what I want you to be. That's who you are. You are my child. Moses is starting to understand that subconsciously. I don't think he knows yet. Looking back, I can see the foreshadowing in that small question of who am I. His faith journey is this constant decrease of doubt, increase in seeking God, and constant turning to God for definition of who he truly is. So, to recap everything, Moses asks this one question, who am I? And he's asking, one, because he's doubting. And then the lesson we can learn from that is that when we doubt, we don't leave room for God's plan. Number 2, he's asking, who are you to God? And the lesson from that is that we all should be asking God who he is constantly, because we can't seek things we don't ask for. Number 3, he asked God flat out, who am I? So Moses was asking God to define himself. And a lesson we can get from that is realizing that when we go to God for definition, that definition is enough. That we are enough. And that God's answer to us is always enough. You are enough, just how you are. He looked at Moses, the murderer, the stutterer, the outcast, the Egyptian, the Hebrew. And he looked at him, he said, no, you're enough for my plan. And I just think that's sick, because if Moses is enough, I'm enough. And God's gonna do great things through my life, and he has great things to do through your life. So, that's all the lessons I have for Moses, just for that little section. And I just encourage you to just read through Exodus. That was just chapters like 1, 2, and like half of 3. So I encourage you to just look over that, ponder a couple things, really look at that question of who am I, and really consider this week how you ask that question, who you let answer that question. Because Moses let a lot of people answer that question for him throughout his life. And it wasn't until a burning bush came to him where he finally begins to let God answer that for him. Start letting God define that question for you of who am I. So thank you guys so much for just hearing me out, listening to this. I love this kind of stuff. Just like the small parts of the Bible that often get missed when they have something, it's just so cool to me. I bug out over that kind of stuff. So anyways, the next video for this series for lessons from, we'll be learning lessons from Hannah next week. Hannah's awesome, and we can learn a lot from her. And then my Bible study for 2 Timothy will continue on, and that will be uploaded on Wednesday. So thank you so much for watching, and hope you all have a blessed day. Love you guys. You guys are awesome. And yeah, just let God tell you who you are this week. So grace and peace. I will see you all later. Goodbye, fellas.